You know, in many ways, I don't know what to say. I've rewritten the sermon. Well, I wrote in here that I've rewritten the sermon a couple times, but I've rewritten it 4 times now. The most recent 2 were this morning. It's been a struggle this week trying to pull something together. A needed word of hope in the midst of our national turmoil. Ordinarily, I don't know that I would preach on an election the Sunday after. We try to keep support for political candidates out of the pulpit because as a church, we can't endorse a candidate. But let's face it, as individuals, we all did. As citizens of this country, we went to the polls on Tuesday and voted for the candidate we believed would do the most good for this country. And the fact is, all the things that matter have been turned into political fodder. The important issues that we must talk about have been labeled political topics precisely so we won't talk about them, so that things won't change, so that we will, like sheep, follow blindly wherever we are led without raising a voice in protest, for fear it might be called too political. On Tuesday, we made our way to the polls, some with dreams of a new barrier being broken, a new era beginning. I spent much of the day with my 8-year-old friend, Lily, who was excited about the news the evening might bring. And I look forward to watching history in the making alongside this fierce and excited young girl. Now, I'll be honest with you, I have voted in 6 presidential elections. In half of them, the candidate I supported won, and in the other half, the candidate I supported lost. The last time my candidate lost, there was no way I would have stood up here and preached about it, partly because I feared I was in the minority at the time, but mostly because, the other guy won, so what was the point in preaching about it from the pulpit? But this election is different. As a person of faith, as a woman called by God to preach the good news, I cannot stand silently in the wake of this election. There are so many parts of me reacting to what happened this week. As a woman, I am demoralized because a woman who ran for president and has been a public servant for 30 years has been smeared and systematically torn down since the very beginning of her career, and those tactics worked, and she lost. She was talked over and interrupted and demeaned and bullied on the national stage in all 3 debates, and that's an experience that, frankly, almost every single woman has experienced numerous times in her life. And I saw the one who treated her that way get rewarded. As a person of peace, I am frightened because I heard people promising violence if the election went the other way, and acts of violence have already taken place on both sides since Tuesday evening. As an ally of those in the LGBTQ community, I am heartbroken as I hear the anguish in the voices of so many. As a granddaughter of a Mexican immigrant, I am angry that my family members were described so hatefully. As a participant in interfaith dialogue, I am worried that all members of Islam are being labeled as potential terrorists. As a pastor who works for inclusion and extravagant hospitality, I am devastated that exclusion and inhospitality won. And as a human being who strives every day to see the humanity in those who think differently from me, I am challenged to understand why people voted the way they did. We are a nation divided, but we are not divided because of who won the presidency. No, our division started long before that. And I wonder if that's what makes this so hard. For months, we have been aching for this election to just be over, so that we could go back to some sort of sense of normalcy where we could just be neighbors and friends and family again and no longer enemies. But I think this election may have broken us. I've heard it from many people across many generations. Never have they remembered this nation being so divided. And we would have been just as divided if the election went the other way. Because as a nation, we have failed to listen to one another. We have failed to recognize ourselves in the other. We have demonized those who think differently and act differently and vote differently. It has been a week of tears for some and a week of rejoicing for others. But the one thing that unites us, sadly, is our division. Those who are devastated can't believe that some are excited, and those who are excited can't for the life of them understand how some could be grieving. And I knew this would happen, no matter how the election turned out. And as a minister, it's always sticky when we delve into the topic of politics. I would never declare before an election who I was going to vote for, though I'm sure many of you could have guessed before today. But I am a human being, a citizen of the United States with a voice and a vote, and I was devastated by the election results. That may place me at odds with some of you and in solidarity with others of you. But I pray that regardless of where you stand, you will hear me out. Because we have important work to do as a nation. I sat on the couch in tears on Tuesday night. Because the way I saw it, a man who used racism, xenophobia, and misogyny to incite and inspire voters was able to win the presidential election. But after I slept on it and spent a great deal of time poring over people's responses to the election, I had to accept that while it was true there were people who voted for our president-elect because of his promises to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico, his promises to ban all Muslims coming into our country, who speaks of and to women in quite shocking ways. That is not why every person who cast their vote for him did so. I have family members that I know voted for him, and I need to listen to them. And I hope that they listen to me as well, but you know what? I can't control that. I can only control how I behave in this world. So I realized the morning after the election that I need to have conversations with people where I really listen to why they voted the way they did. I need to hear that people are struggling to make ends meet, that their wages have not increased in 30 years, though the costs of living have skyrocketed. That they have seen their communities die because manufacturing plants have closed down, that they have lost their jobs and benefits, and the only jobs available to them now are in the service sector. And not only do they not pay comparably, they don't include health insurance or pensions or sick days or vacation days. They feel so betrayed by Washington, D.C., and felt that this person they viewed as an outsider may be their only hope. And so this election feels like a victory for them. And I'm not going to stand here and lay blame on one political party or another, because now is not the time to do that. Besides, it won't change or assuage the fear and anger people feel. But if I label entire segments of the population as uneducated rednecks or country hicks or whatever other derogatory term we come up with, I better believe they are not going to seek to make any effort to understand why I voted the way I did. Name calling is not going to solve this problem. So yes, that is the reality for many who voted for the president-elect. But it's important for them to hear the cries of those who did not vote for him as well. While for many a vote for Donald Trump did not equate to a vote for racism, xenophobia, and hate, it did equate as a vote for that for some people. A member of our church, while sitting in a waiting room on Wednesday morning, heard another man say to his wife, "Well, thank God Trump is now president. He's going to get rid of all the blacks, homosexuals, Jews, and terrorists, and we'll get our country back." Those words may make some Trump supporters shudder. But those sentiments are a reality for the portion of the American electorate. And those who did not vote for him, those who are part of some of the marginalized groups targeted by that man's comments to his wife, they are terrified. The things I saw in my newsfeed as I scrolled through Facebook on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning broke my heart. Our own Courtney Brown wrote, "This third grade teacher has a big job to do. Many of my students are Hispanic and have told me that if Trump wins, all Mexicans will be sent back to Mexico. In their third grade minds, that's how it works. Today, I'm going to work with a heaping help of Jesus in my heart. Today, we will learn reading and math. We will also learn about respectful differences and unconditional love. Maybe not via curriculum, but via my actions for sure." Another friend of mine shared a conversation he and his husband had via text on Wednesday morning. One of them said, "Whenever marriage equality makes its way back into the spotlight, There's no way we'll legally lose any rights to our kids, is there? We'll both still be legally bound to them, right? To which his husband responded, I think so. And then he said, we just may not be legally bound to each other anymore, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world. My newsfeed was filled with worries and fears like that. It was terrible to behold. But I also saw the anger and hurt from people who voted for the president-elect. People who couldn't believe that their family and friends truly thought they were xenophobic, racist, and misogynistic just because they voted for Trump. And I heard their cries as well. I was forced to consider the hurts and fears they are experiencing in their lives that led them to vote as they did. I know I have family members, as I mentioned before, that voted that way. And I'm not willing to cut them out of my life for doing so. And now it may very well be that I am coming from a place, I know I am coming from a place of privilege, being able to say that. Because I am a straight, cisgender white woman with health insurance whose status in this nation is not going to change, most likely, under a Trump administration. But I am an ally of many groups of people who cannot say that with 100% certainty. And I hear you, and I ache with you. Still, it's important for me to listen to the stories of those who voted differently than me. Because right now, no one is leaving space for those who might think or vote differently than they do. People are unfriending family and friends left and right, refusing to be in the same room with people they once loved. I can't help but think many of the bold declarations I'm seeing are tantamount to cutting off one's nose to spite one's face, because, let's face it, we are all living in this country together. Most of us are not going to leave because of how this election turned out, though we may threaten it. We have to learn to live together. But how can we ever begin to do that when the wounds are so deep? We have a broken and divided electorate. And right now it feels like healing might not be possible. But we are people of faith, and we know there is a way to healing. All through the Bible, we find people crying out to God in the face of injustice, in the midst of distress, when the people are downtrodden and broken and devastated. The great prophets raised their voices against the powers that be that held the people under the heel of their boots. We turn to Scripture and read the words from the prophet Isaiah, who preached to a broken people, a people living in exile, a people who had lost all hope. And Isaiah reminded them of God's work in this world, of God's dream for all of God's people. A new heaven and a new earth where there will be no more weeping, no cries of distress, where lives are not cut short by disease or famine or poverty or war, where all will have housing and food to eat, where work will bring dignity and life, and all will be blessed. The people of Israel needed this word from Isaiah, the reminder that God had a dream for them, and that what they were living at that moment in time was not God's dream. And today I remind you that we are a resurrection people, worshiping the God of life, the God who does not allow death to have the last word. Our God is a God of justice, the God of the poor, the God of the marginalized, the God of the voiceless, the God of the weary. When we feel beaten down, know that God has a dream for us. All week long, as I wondered what the future holds for us as a nation, I had segments of Maya Angelou's poem, Still I Rise, running through my head, a refrain lifting the fog of my despair. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I will rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Out of the cuts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. We all rise. People of color and people of all gender identities, people of varying sexual orientations, and people of all socioeconomic levels, we will join hands together and we will rise. People of all ethnicities and people of all faiths, people with power and people with none, we will join our hands together and we will rise. People of justice and people of love, people of hope and people of courage, we will join our hands together and we will rise. We who are gathered in this place are people of God, and we know what we are called to, so we will rise. We are called to listen to one another, to see the humanity of each person and to treat them with dignity, so we will rise. We are called to speak out when we see injustice, to stand on the side of the oppressed, to feed and clothe and visit and care for and welcome the least of these, so we will rise. We are called to work together to live into God's dream for all of God's people, so we will rise. It starts with you and it starts with me. It starts with us, so we will rise. Before you make an assumption about someone because of who they voted for, stop for a moment and imagine what it's like to be in their shoes. Imagine the fear of not being able to provide for your family. Imagine the reality of not having any good jobs in your community anymore. Imagine the anger at broken promises by politician after politician. Imagine the fear of having your marriage dissolved through no actions of your own. Imagine the terror of hearing that a powerful leader doesn't want to allow members of your faith into our country. Imagine the anguish of hearing your child cry because they believe they are going to be sent back to Guatemala. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes, listen to them speak with the intent to hear their story rather than the intent to formulate a response, and then join hands with them so they can rise. We can rise together. We have hard work to do, and our work starts here. And to those of you who are living in very real fear right now because of campaign promises that were made and now have the potential of being realized, know that you have so many gathered here in this space right now who have stood up to stand with you, who will help you, who will rise up with you. And I believe they will do so regardless of who they voted for, because this church is a safe space for all who enter. Despite our differences, we will stand beside you and love you through it all, and we will fight for you. It is our calling as a church to make sure that God's dream includes you, to show you through our words and our work that you are not alone and you are loved beyond your wildest imagination. We won't let those in power leave you behind or strip you of your rights that you have fought so hard to get. The call of justice will not let us stay silent. The call of God demands that we speak, propels us to act, and moves us to love. And so together we will rise. Amen. We now join our voices together as we sing to our God of justice.